and I'm going to introduce Cate. Uh, Cate is the Youth Engagement Associate at the Climate Reality Project. She grew up in Boston, and in high school, she worked as a member of the city's Green Team to clean and restore polluted urban wilds near her home. Motivated to understand and address the connections between environmental and health injustices, she studied health sciences and environmental studies at Northeastern University. Prior to working with the Climate Reality Project, Cate was involved in campus organizing efforts to improve local climate justice in Boston neighborhoods surrounding Northeastern University's campus. At Climate Reality, she draws on her own student organizing experience to train and support students, running campaigns for climate solutions in their own schools and communities. Outside of work, Cate is a volunteer member of Sunrise DC, a youth organization advocating for climate justice in the DC metro area. And one of the reasons I wanted Cate to present is that she's so great at facilitating some of the meetings that we're having here in Broward County with some of our green team members, particularly this year, a junior team. And she's fantastic at that and brings a really great skills to bear on that. And I thought she would be terrific in presenting to us. And she also just got back from a trip to Vietnam recently, which she got a fantastic tour there, I guess, with a family friend and or friend and their family. So, Cate, why don't you go ahead and start your presentation?
Thanks so much, Scott. Yeah, really excited to be talking to you guys. And like Scott said, I grew up in Boston, but I now live in DC, just for some context. And the only other thing I'll say before I get started is that I grew up in Boston. I went to Boston public schools my whole life. I still talk to a lot of my teachers from school. My sister just is about to graduate from college, and after that, she's going to be a teacher. So I feel very excited to get to talk to a group of educators, and I love working with students. But yeah, I have some slides that I'll share, I think. But also like feel free to come off mute, put questions in the chat. Would love for this to be interactive as much as you'd like it to be. But I think the slides will just be like a helpful visual as I go along. But in terms of like what I'm planning to, do the slides look good? Also, can everyone see those? This might help too. You can see the slides. Cool. Um, in terms of what I'm planning to go through, just gonna do a little warm-up activity, and then I'll share a little bit about the origin of the Green Schools campaign and an overview of what it actually is. I'll share some current campaign stories, talk about what these local campaigns actually look like on the grounds in action, share a little bit about how new folks can get involved in Green Schools campaign, and then leave it up to some discussion and questions for the rest of the time. So this is an activity that I often do with the students that I work with to help like ground us in why we're invested in this campaign work. And I've never done it with teachers. And so I know some of you are teachers in public schools and schools, and some of you are educators in other capacities. So I thought it would be interesting to get your perspective on changes that we want to see in our schools, since I've only gotten student perspectives by doing this. And so, yeah, even if you're like an educator outside of a traditional school system, I'm curious what kind of thoughts you have. And so it's just like an envisioning activity, which is really just the process of imagining the future that we want. And I think it can be just powerful because it helps motivate us to fight for the future when we're clear on and excited by what it actually is that we're fighting for. And I think it can also help us like find a little bit of extra hope and energy in order to fuel this kind of organizing work. And so just want to like ask each of you to think about either the school or school district that you teach in, or maybe like you have a student in your life who's at a school or school district that you can think about, or the school in your local community, whatever it might be, and think about what you would like this school to look like. If you could kind of craft this ideal school or district, what would it look like? Um, and think about the other questions on the slide here. What about this ideal school or district is similar to what the current school or district you're envisioning is? What might be different? who is there, what do you see, hear, smell, what can you do in this school or district. Um, and I'm gonna switch my screen share for a second, um, because there's a link I'm gonna put in the chat to this little Canva whiteboard, which is a fun tool. Um, and here, let me put the link in the chat. But basically, if you go onto this Canva whiteboard, you'll be able to type things into these boxes to answer those questions that were on the screen, thinking about what you want to see in our schools. And you can answer those questions in the context of like climate and environmental justice, but also just like general issues in schools that you think need to be better addressed. And you can type into these boxes with words, or if you click elements in Canva, you can search for things and you can add um, photos. Here it is. So like if you think we need more green space at our schools, that might be something you add. You'll see I added a water fountain because I remember when I was a 10th grade student, it became public knowledge that the high school and middle school I was at had lead in our water. And so it's been quite important to me since then, make sure all students have clean drinking water in their schools. So anyways, I think I'll give us like it's 7:47. I'm thinking until 7:50 for folks to either write onto this little interactive whiteboard thoughts you have, um, or if you're having trouble using that, feel free to come off mute and share or put things in the chat. But just wanted to take like 3 minutes, and I think that you should be able to see the questions again.
Um, great. If we, do you have some instructions you might add in case we got people coming in late, or you just want to repeat yourself if we got some folks jumping in from the meeting? I don't know if Rhonda was in that meeting or not when she.
Yeah, I'm happy to repeat, Rhonda. Mostly on this link that I'm going to put in the chat again, we are just writing out some ideas for what we'd like to see kind of change in our schools and school districts in the United States, both related to like climate and also just general issues that we have noticed in our schools and want to see improved, and some ideas for like what those improvements might look like.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I was late.
No, no worries. And yeah, you can feel free to put them on the white, like the interactive Canva whiteboard I put in the chat, or if that's too much, fair enough, and you can just drop things in the chat too. But yeah, we'll do that for like another minute or two. I'll give it one more minute. Okay. Curious if anyone has any thoughts they came up with that they want to share out loud before we move on.
Well, like you, Kate, clean air, clean water, natural light in our buildings, uh, ways that we can be out in nature, enjoying plants and trees right on the campus, and yeah, even doing classes outside, engaging with gardening. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Thanks for sharing. And the clean or the like natural light one is something I honestly hadn't thought of in a while, but as I think back to myself in high school, oh my goodness, that would have been lovely, and great for learning. So appreciate those thoughts. Um, and yeah, I'm gonna move us along now, but the question that I usually ask students after we do that activity is how can we move towards this vision for our schools that we've just spent some time brainstorming? And we kind of like throw out different ways we can do that. And one of those ways that I often propose is through the Green Schools campaign. And so I'm going to spend like the next 20 or so minutes talking about the Green Schools campaign and how it can help us address some of these issues and achieve these schools that we want for our students and teachers. And yeah, how Green Schools campaign can help us get these infrastructure changes that improve air quality, water quality, sunlight, all the things. So starting off with some background context, in 2019, a group of students, teachers, parents, and others in the Los Angeles Unified School District came together to tackle some issues that they'd been noticing in and around their schools, including some of the issues that I'm sure you all just thought of for the schools in your own communities. Things like worsening climate disasters like fires in the area, poor school building infrastructure with bad air quality, lack of solar panels on the roofs. These were things that the students and the adults who were mentoring their campaign started to notice. And so they decided to fight for better schools and a better climate by running a campaign to, oh yeah.
Okay, this didn't happen spontaneously. Something brought these people together. Was there a person or was there an event? What did that?
Yeah, so the way Climate Reality, which is the organization I work for, kind of functions is it trains people from like any kind of walk of life to be climate advocates in whatever it is that they do. And then folks who get trained form these local community chapters. And so I know that there's like, for example, a chapter in Broward, Florida, but there's a Los Angeles chapter as well. And so that's where the adults who were a part of this campaign kind of got connected through being members of this Los Angeles Climate Reality chapter. And then the students were students at the same schools and knew each other and were kind of just talking about these issues and they were looking for adult support and so reached out to the chapter. Um, and also some of their teachers. But yeah, that's kind of how the team originally formed in this case. Um, yeah, and so they ran this campaign. Their goal was to get the entire school district, which is the second largest in the US and has over 600,000 students, to transition all of its buildings and vehicles to 100% clean energy. And so they did that, and after months of meeting with district leaders and getting their fellow classmates on board, they successfully got the Los Angeles Unified School District School Board to pass a resolution committing to a transition to 100% clean energy in all sectors by 2040. So that was the specific commitment that was made. It was a big deal and it was a big win. And yeah, I guess you might know this, but just for context, when a school board passes a resolution or a policy, it's a documentation of a decision or an action that they've either already taken or are committing to take. And so since this resolution was passed by the school board in Los Angeles, we've seen implementation kind of progress over time towards more clean energy infrastructure in the schools. And so coming off of this win and wanting to build this momentum, a group of students took Green Schools campaign on as this like independent volunteer-led project by students, and they launched it nationally as a campaign with the goal of transitioning all schools in the US to 100% clean energy. And so, yeah, again, it was like these students in LA, they were really excited by their win. They had just put a lot of work in and kind of didn't want to see it all fizzle. And so they were like, how can we support other students to use this model to win climate action progress at their own schools and districts? And when they did this and envisioned Green Schools campaign, there were two things really like central to this vision. The first one is that it's is student leadership, and the second one is community engagement. Regarding that first point, Green Schools campaign is very intergenerational, and it like on the at the local level very much relies on stakeholders of all ages. Lots of parents and teachers are involved. But at the same time, the original like students who founded Green Schools campaign were very aware that young people have a very unique stake in this issue, both climate change broadly and specifically climate action at schools, and so felt it was important to prioritize investing and developing students to lead these campaigns. And so teachers and adults and parents have continued to play a very important like mentorship role. Um, but ultimately it's students who are leading these campaigns. And then we've got community engagement as also very central to Green Schools campaign for a couple reasons. First, just acknowledging that schools are very significant emitters of greenhouse gases in the United States. And so uh, getting schools to transition within communities can help impact full like community scale transitions to clean energy. And so want to keep other community members engaged, but then also knowing that even like local community members who are not directly connected to schools can still be quite impacted both positively and negatively when schools transition to clean energy because of infrastructure changes, construction, all those things. And so wanting to make sure all these community members are engaged in the process. So that's how Green Schools campaign came to be. And once they took it and made it this project that they wanted to make national by 2021, they had done quite a bit of successful outreach within California because that's where they had connections. And in Lodi Unified School District and Long Beach Unified School Districts, they had Green Schools campaigns launched. And just to like dive into these two examples a bit more, in Long Beach, after more than a year of doing research and advocacy, the Long Beach campaign successfully got the Long Beach School Board to pass a board policy amendment committing to 100% clean energy. So another successful win just a bit after Los Angeles. The Lodi campaign has yet to get their board to pass a resolution. It's a much more conservative district. And so that campaign's still quite active. It's a new generation of students leading it, but they're still kind of trying to make the case for clean energy in their district. And yeah, I'll also just say that since this expansion within California, Climate Reality has taken on like a more formal supportive role for these student leaders. And so we have some like staff support, including myself, behind Green Schools campaign now, which has helped it to continue to grow because it's not just students with only volunteer time doing this work. And so just to give you an overview of like where we've been able to launch and seed new local school district based campaigns. These are the states where we currently have teams that are pushing for clean energy commitments from their school leaders. Some of our states have like more than one active campaign. Some only have one active campaign. So this isn't just the number of campaigns, but more so just showing you where we've got campaigns right now. And yeah, you'll see Florida on the map, where we've got a team in Broward County that Scott's a huge part of, and we've got a team in Gainesville and some interest in Palm Beach, though not like an official campaign quite yet. So that's kind of where we are in Florida. And I also wanted to highlight the campaign team that Scott's a part of, which is the Broward Green Schools campaign team, because they've been quite successful. And in December, they successfully got their school board to pass a resolution in support of 100% clean energy. And that team is now advocating for implementation of this resolution by meeting with school board members one-on-one to try to determine like what the transition will actually look like and what next steps need to be taken to make it happen. But that was like one of our more recent campaign team wins, and it happened to be in Florida, so that's exciting. Also wanted to just highlight that I've seen by working with teams across the US that in a lot of cases, in regions where there's like one campaign that's successful, it will often help push for other districts in that region to take action. The like Los Angeles to Long Beach connection is one example. Even these Broward students brought up some of the progress in Miami-Dade County as a talking point for why Broward should do it, and I think that was really motivational in terms of pushing the school board. And so because like with this in mind, I think it's exciting to one, just like be talking to all of you, because in my head with like the progress in Miami, specifically in 2024, Miami-Dade County School District passed a resolution for 100% clean energy. And then with this recent Broward resolution, and then with the two newer campaign teams and interests in Gainesville and in Palm Beach, I think that we can hope to see like more districts in Florida following suit with a little push from some student-led advocacy. And yeah, I again, just want to highlight Green Schools campaign has shown us that these student-led initiatives can really push school boards to take action. And I wanted to give you just a bit of a better sense of what these campaigns actually look like in action on the grounds. I know there are a lot of words on this slide, but I was going to read these definitions out anyways, and I know some people have a easier time reading rather than listening. So feel free to read if it's easier. But um, generally, like the way that Green Schools campaign thinks of a campaign in general is that a campaign is like a time-bound effort with clear goals to accomplish some kind of concrete and tangible change. And when we run these campaigns, we're often thinking about 6 key campaign elements, and those are goals, demands, targets, spectrum of support, resources, and then strategy and tactics. And just to run through them all with an example from Green Schools campaign to try to make these vocab words feel more concrete. Um, the first one is goals. These are the desired outcomes of a campaign. So I like to think of them as like what becomes true when you've won your campaign. And so a local Green Schools campaign team might have a goal of transitioning the school district to 100% clean energy by 2040, for example. And then we think of the demands as what we're actually asking decision makers to do in order to win a campaign. And so these demands are very specific and tangible and actionable. And so in this same Green Schools example, the demand might be to pass a resolution committing the district to 100% clean energy by 2040. And I think the like natural next question is like, okay, we want to achieve 100% clean energy. We're going to do that by passing a resolution. Who's going to pass the resolution? And those are the targets. Targets are really the final decision makers of a campaign ask. And in a lot of cases for public school district, this is the school board. In private schools, which I also am help to support like student teams in private schools, it's often board of trustees or other school administrators. But those are the targets. We also think a lot on the grounds with these local teams about resources, thinking about what a team already has or might need to help win. And some things that often come up include meeting spaces for campaign team meetings, having a teacher advisor, or some kind of adult advisor to support with like some logistical work, scheduling. I know in the Broward team, some of the adult supporters are helpful with carpooling students to school board meetings. Some other resources that come up are like computers for research, megaphones for rallies, all those things. We also think a lot about spectrum of support, and this is the process of mapping out different community members and audiences of a campaign based on what we think their attitudes will be towards the campaign or what we know their attitudes are. And so for example, right, you might think about like the local environmental club teacher advisor at your high school, probably going to be supportive. You might think of the local utilities company, which might be opposed because maybe if you're proposing that your school own its own clean energy infrastructure, the utility company might not profit as much from that. Um, Sometimes like we think about school bus drivers and how they might feel if school buses transition to be electric as opposed to run on gas. So that's the idea of just thinking about who in your community you want to engage and what kind of work you'll have to put into getting them on your side. And then the last point here is strategy. Oh yeah, Rhonda, go ahead.
I was just thinking about the massive benefits to the success of a program like this. And I think about this in terms of my own kids having grown up in a net zero energy home that they were actually involved in designing. They never experienced any of that at school. It was all at home, but they used their home experiences with solar panels and solar hot water and other energy efficient components of design to do science fair projects and, talk about it and things like that. So I wonder if is it too obvious or should there be another category here of benefits?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that um, for my kids, if you ask them, because they're 22 and 29 now, but if you ask them, they would tell you that they grew up in what they consider to be part of the solution.
Yeah. I like the way you're thinking about it. And yeah, I think like the case, I mean, we focus a lot in our messaging when we're trying to like get school boards and other decision makers and other influential people and just like generally other community members to join our campaign teams about like what the benefits are. And so I think that's like made its way into like a key mobilization tactic of these campaigns for how to get people on board and how to motivate people to support Green Schools campaign, talking about those benefits to the students as well as to like climate. So yeah, I think I appreciate it. And yeah, it's not listed here, but I think you're right that it easily could be in the context of maybe like key messaging or something.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful thing. It really, really is. And for kids to have the opportunity to say, look at the metering devices that are generally incorporated with the green energy at the facilities, and just be able to, like see it in real time. It's such a hands-on, real thing. It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the resolutions that have been passed are better than others, to say the least, but some of the really strong ones have written in um, the like guaranteeing like student engagement in the transition process and incorporating like climate education and green jobs training into the transition process, which I think gets at exactly what you're talking about. Um, yeah, and a bit more about like what this looks like on the grounds then. Very broad overview, but student teams will often start with setting goals and structuring their campaign team, and then it involves a lot of research, and this is often what kind of will overwhelm students or maybe like make them feel as though this isn't a manageable project when really it is. But I think the like amount of information that needs to be found can feel like more of an obstacle, and that's where adults have been quite supportive with helping students realize, oh, we can actually access this information. Not knowing it right now doesn't mean we can't do this kind of work. But yeah, so using research to gather information about like who decision makers are, other climate action plans in the area, past resolutions that school board members have passed to get a sense of which school board members might be on board, that kind of stuff. And then lots of mobilizing, bringing in students and peers and others in the community to take action with the campaign, and then actually taking those actions, which is where advocacy tactics come in. Um, once students get to the point where they're actually, say, writing letters to school board members, speaking at school board meetings, hosting educational events for their students, to actually make the resolutions happen. Um, I have like a few more slides, and I put this one in because I figured that maybe like a natural question that comes up for folks is how do school districts pay for this transition to clean energy? Since I think now more than ever, but still before right now, like funding in public schools and in any school is a big question. And so lots of the student advocacy work does include educating school decision makers about how they can pay for a clean energy transition and how clean energy infrastructure can actually save schools money in the long run. A lot of school decision makers have a lot on their minds and a lot to deal with, and so this isn't always like top of mind or the like key thing that they have lots of knowledge about. And so campaign members, including like students and teachers, don't need to be experts on this kind of stuff, on the funding and the financing, but it has been helpful for them to know just a little bit so that they can use it to help make their case. And oftentimes this involves discussing the Inflation Reduction Act. And yeah, I don't want to repeat information so I'm going to do a brief overview, but for like 1 minute, but really just the IRA being this bill of legislation that was signed by President Biden back in 2022. And you can see on this slide, right, it's the single largest investment in climate and energy in US history. Um, some analyses of the IRA say that it could reduce carbon emissions by 40% by 2030. And generally, it aims to reduce these emissions by offering lots of different financial incentives for investments in clean energy infrastructure. And I'll also note that the financial incentives within the IRA include tax credits, and that means that individuals, companies, organizations can essentially owe less money in taxes if they install clean energy. But I'm sure we know here that schools in the US are tax exempt, meaning they don't pay taxes. But this is where a really game-changing provision of the IRA has come into play, and it's called direct pay, or sometimes it's called elective pay. And what direct pay does is it means that these tax exempt entities, including schools, can also get essentially tax credits for sustainable energy projects, where instead of a credit, since they don't pay for taxes, schools are eligible for these incentives in the form of a cash payment that is equivalent in amount to what the tax credit actually would be. And so direct pay really incentivizes schools to invest in clean energy because it allows them to earn cash on clean energy projects, which is great. And we're now 2 years past August of 2022 when the IRA was passed, and direct pay has been like available for long enough that school districts are starting to receive their cash payments for projects that they've already finished implementing. And so I'll put two links in the chat. One is for the Salt Lake City School District right here, and then another is for the Buncombe County School District, so Utah and North Carolina. There's two examples, there's lots more, but both of these districts have received over $1.2 million in cash payments from the IRS for solar panel projects, and they've received that money quite recently, which I mentioned because I know that a lot of funding in the IRA has been frozen by Trump's executive orders, but right now, direct pay money is safe and has still been distributed to school districts, which is really good. Um, so that's the IRA. I have some discussion questions that maybe we can just do in the main room with everyone here. But my idea here was that hopefully seeing these examples of schools like in Salt Lake City and in North Carolina that have started to receive these direct pay cash payments for clean energy projects, and knowing that those projects started with community advocacy campaigns, has gotten you excited about the idea of Green Schools campaign in your district or in your school. And so wanted to just have a discussion with all of you about what it would mean and look like to bring this type of campaign to a local school near you or to your students, if that's the case for you. And so I've got some questions here, and I'll note that like after this, plenty of time for you to ask me questions, and then I have some logistical information about next steps if that's of interest. But for now, just curious if any of you have thoughts on like why a Green Schools campaign might be important for your school or district. Or the second question is like, what about running a Green Schools campaign do you think would appeal to your students? And if you think it would, how you might consider pitching this project. And I'm happy to like brainstorm that with you. And then third question is, as a teacher or an educator, how do you think you could support students to run a Green Schools campaign, or what do you think your role might be? And I see Rhonda's hand.
Kate, do you have any intel on schools like in Florida where we have the school choice legislation such that parents are more easily able to choose a private school over a public school, and there's a big push for charter schools? And since I'm, no longer the parent of elementary or high school age students, I'm a little dim on this right now, but I don't know what that means in terms of funding, the private, charter, public, and the private schools I know don't really participate in the local school boards. Should this conversation be mostly focused on the public schools and the school boards? And Scott, I appreciate your thoughts about this too, but I didn't know if you had any wisdom about this, conventional wisdom.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'll answer from a few perspectives, but for Green Schools campaign, when we're doing outreach to try to seed new campaigns, we're often focusing on public school districts for a number of reasons, including that like infrastructure changes in schools can address a lot of issues, not just like climate clean energy issues. And so trying to figure out where this impact can go the furthest and what districts could most benefit from new infrastructure and trying to work in those districts. Also, public school districts, it's often a bigger impact for the same effort because a commitment to transition an entire school district means a lot more buildings transitioning to clean energy rather than say like one private school building. So the impact is bigger. Um, so uh, there's one other point I was going to make, but I think I lost my train of thought.
I don't know where charter schools fit into this because there's some kind of a hybrid between public and
Yeah.
private.
Yeah, so charter schools similarly, like the in the same way for private schools versus public school districts, the decision maker for charter schools is also different. But we've had private schools run green schools campaigns, and charter schools also have green schools campaigns. And one charter school has already succeeded and gotten a commitment to a transition to 100% clean energy. So similarly, and I'll also say charter schools and private schools are also able to access direct pay funding in the Inflation Reduction Act in the same way that public school districts are. So that funding is still available because all of them are tax exempt. Public. Um, yeah,
Well,
that's my
our governor is very busy working to return money from the federal government to Washington in an attempt to be like Mr. Doge on steroids. I don't know if that we could turn that money around for some specific purposes like this. And
yeah.
I'm not sure which accounts are actually being turned around. I mean, he did a press conference just today talking about 800 and something um, $billion, something horrible, turning it
Yeah,
around and not wanting to waste it because it was ideologically earmarked for such things as climate.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, Ron. Ron, I just have a comment or two, and I'm wondering if Ben wants to also ask a question about where he is about some of the school thing. But just a comment, because I am very interested in involving the Pembroke Pines charter schools in some kind of resolution and working with Kate on getting a group together. And in fact, I thought we would have maybe a representative on this call. Maybe that person is going to watch the recording, but I'm going to follow up and ask the charter school principals to maybe take a look at this and see if we can get them involved. Yeah, I'm not sure what that 800 million, if that involved any of this, work, possible direct pay with the schools. I don't know. It's a good question. Um, yeah, we'll have to keep our eye on that stuff for sure. Ben, did you have something that you wanted to ask? I mean, you look like I know you turned your camera on there, so I didn't know if you were wanting to interact with her. Oh, I can't hear. We can't hear you.
Um,
There you go.
yeah, great presentation. Again, I'm working on a different kind of green initiative, which is more about reuse and food waste reduction in K through 12, which is amazing. But yeah, getting the student voice to interact with the school board is very powerful. It's a good lesson for the school board, it's a good lesson for the students, and it's very effective because you can't really argue with well-informed students around it. We have zero waste stuff over here in California. If you all need some documents, something like that. But yeah, the energy stuff is a little more complicated because it's a little more infrastructure heavy, which means like a lot of the school and school members can wait for the students to just graduate. Having that adult in the room to make sure it's sustainable, keep that momentum going is really, really key. But once you get that momentum going, it is kind of like a truck that can just absolutely just take over, which is lovely. Yeah, Oakland has a horde of charters. The charter thing is very on the water. Like, I think it's just an easier plan just to focus on public school and make sure we're serving the underserved when possible. And that the public school system seem to be a little bit more on that. But that being said, the contagion of schools is very real. So if you can get a charter to get over the finish line, you're a public entity. That can often be the impetus to get the party started for that public entity. So yeah, can't talk about Florida politics, but yeah, it's good to hear that some of the stuff happening in California is making its way over to the East Coast.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with everything you said more, Ben. Appreciate it. And I can just Rhonda, back to your question, I can just share a little bit about that money being um given sent back to Washington and the IRA. I'm no expert, but my understanding is that that is like the grant money from the Inflation Reduction Act, but direct pay, which is what schools have access to for funding for clean energy, is not grants or loans, but rather tax credits and is filed through the IRS. And so it goes directly to schools and isn't being turned away in the same way. And what I'll also say is that while presidential executive orders can freeze this kind of like grant and loan funding, uh, making changes to tax codes, which includes like tax credits, would have to go through Congress. And most of these tax credits have benefited Republican congressional districts. And so there have actually been like 14 Republican members of Congress who have come out publicly in support of keeping these tax credits around. And so the people who are the experts have informed me that people aren't as worried about direct pay benefits disappearing right now. Um, Obviously, like nothing's certain and laws are being broken left and right, but that's the like consensus right now.
Kate?
Yeah.
Hi, Mary Boy here in Orange County. I'm curious if you might have information about the big school districts in the nation and what they have done, whether, involved through a green school program or not. Um, because here in Orange County, they are the ninth largest in the nation. And so they look to big city school districts or big school districts, not rural ones, for a comparison. And so I'm I've always never gone digging for that, but I'm just thinking somebody must have assembled that by now. The big school districts. Do you know of any like compilation of that information?
Yeah, I honestly I do have a pretty good list of just all the big school districts that have passed these kinds of resolutions and where they are in their progress that I can maybe share with Scott to share out with the rest of the group after this call. Um, and like with links to those resolutions and uh oftentimes what happens is these school districts pass a resolution which doesn't include that much detail, and then one of the like next steps is a really detailed, like many, often hundreds of page document, which is like the climate action plan that details how the transition is actually going to happen and how any other commitments made in the resolution are actually going to happen. Um, and yeah, I can share, like when I share that with Scott, I can highlight which of those I think are the stronger ones and which maybe aren't. Because there are like some really cool creative things that some districts are doing that I think I wish were a bit more well known, like you're saying, that other school districts could follow. Um, One of like my favorite examples is Denver Public School District. They have committed to clean energy transition and are doing some really cool like energy justice work in that process. And so, for example, they're putting solar panels on schools that those schools own, and excess energy that's generated by the solar panels they're giving to the like low income families of the schools for free. And so like families that are experiencing like energy uh energy insecurity because of money issues are now getting increased access to like free energy from their public school. And it's like it was probably hard to come up with that idea the first time, but it's a lot easier to replicate it. And so trying to like, yeah, have school districts follow the lead of other good examples is important. So I can share those links with Scott.
Um,
Kate, can I,
go ahead.
oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Scott. I just, are there, a lot of what goes on in Florida and other places has to do with bottom line? And I recognize that there are huge obstacles to starting up, and all of those obstacles, all of those bumps in the road that we hit when we're trying to do brand new things are normal. When we built our energy efficiency demonstration project home, we started in 2006, and it took us 3 years to build it because nobody knew what the heck we were talking about when we wanted certain components. um, so it was a steep learning curve, and there's no shame in that. But what I was curious is, are there economic examples, are there numbers that can be shared currently about savings for school districts?
Yes, there's some really cool numbers. And again, I can share specific links that might be helpful because I don't have all the numbers in my head, but even I was meeting with a student in Gainesville, actually, so in Florida recently, and her school has two campus buildings, one from 2012 that has had like no energy efficiency measures at all, and another which is like LEED Platinum certified. And that building's energy costs are 1/10 the cost of the other campus building. So like quick, easy Florida example right there for you. But yeah, I can share some links about the more specific details of like why these are really good cost saving measures.
One thing I have not seen, and I bet it's out there somewhere. We know that energy efficient buildings by definition use less electricity, and so that's great. And I'm wondering if they also have less maintenance costs, but I don't know if that's been documented. Yeah, so because that's a big dollar item for school districts too. Scheduled maintenance, unscheduled maintenance, and that's once you build that building, you've got to deal with the maintenance and operating it. So operations is part, but maintenance is definitely a big dollar item to look at. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't seen as much, but some of the resources I send might have details. It has come up as a question in terms of maintenance, like training people up in the skills to do this maintenance work on new equipment, and having to invest in that kind of training.
Yeah, I know the training aspect. I just visited Florida's first net zero school, built in 2019, Neo City Academy. Some of you probably know it or been there. And they have put their heating and cooling and their DOAS for the air circulation in closets in the building. And so this is not sitting up on the roof. And I've got to believe that's got to help, with maintenance and certainly with access. So you don't have to put maintenance people on your roof, which you don't really want to do anyway. So I think there's some things we could talk up and document on the maintenance side that would be of interest to school district people.
Yeah.
Like the upfront costs can be a little daunting. There will be maintenance costs with any green project, but it's different, and that difference is kind of what it's kind of like. I don't know how to do that, but one would think that the cost savings will be significant. You do flooring that's a little more eco-friendly, and like it's easier to clean, less time for the custodian to do that, and it has all these fun ripple effects, but it's hard to capture, it's hard to do for sure. Solar panels have also gotten way cheaper than they were 10, 15 years ago. And so like it's getting a lot easier to install them, they're getting better at installing them, and then there's indications that they're going to be lasting longer as well. So good questions to ask, but it should be pointing in the right direction. Did any of y'all go to Orlando for the Green Schools Conference a couple weeks ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, the green building folks know a lot more about those fun topics than I'm afraid I do. But yeah, it's all pointing in the direction you're describing, Mary.
Yeah.
Okay. I know Rhonda's got a hand up. Rhonda, I'm going to turn it over to you in a minute, but we're kind of running. We've got about a minute or two left, and I do want to let people know about next month's activity. So we'll give it another minute or two for question, and then I don't know if Susan has a comment as well. She's been quiet so far, but I know she's been involved with the program, so she may have a comment or two. Yeah, thank you, Kate, for some follow-up stuff. Rhonda, do you have a final question?
Yeah, I just had been noticing Third Act kind of getting involved with the solar, almost like solar co-op, but it's not geographically limited. And I thought that would be a super cool outreach, because schools are such a great opportunity to teach the parents. And in this case, the Third Act, to the extent that Kate is familiar with them, I'm sure she is, they're, it's the grandparents, it's us kind of, and to ripple out to that generation and get that support back from them. But there are opportunities to work with these sort of discounted bulk buying programs that I think Third Act is championing, as well as like the Solar United Neighbors and solar co-ops. Mary, you might have some better intel on that. I'm not really sure how that's working, but there may be sort of more discounted ways for schools to get their green energy installed.
Not that I'm not aware of co-ops being involved with school, helping schools in particular. They, in theory, if they're in the scope, if they're in the geographic territory of a co-op, small commercial buildings, not big ones, and schools tend to be quite much bigger than we're talking about here. So I haven't seen that mechanism used for school financing.
I was specifically talking about the organization Third Act being involved with they're in some way solar purveyors now. I'm not sure.
I'm not
Yeah,
what they're doing.
Rhonda. Okay, yeah, Rhonda, I heard some of that presentation just to wind up, and they're working with, they have a specific outlet that you can see on their website that I can show you, and I can pass along to Kate, that's going to help finance. I think they're more individual targets than schools, but I did actually meet someone who's with the self-help credit union here in South Florida. And they've got actually credit that group is around the country in certain states as well. And they are actually willing to fund schools. They don't advertise it widely, but there may be some other funding mechanisms for schools that are interested in doing this, if they are running into some funding issues from the federal government from that. So that is a possibility. I will be in touch with you more, Rhonda, about that, and I'll pass that along to Kate as well. I think that's an interesting point. So we'll do that.
I can't take any credit for the knowledge on that exactly, but I've definitely spent some time talking to Bill McKibben, and if you ask Bill McKibben to weigh in on whether or not they should spend some of their energies in helping schools to go green, I'm sure I know the answer.
Okay, I'm gonna follow up with you about
Give Bill a call.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. Ben, that's cool. Okay, we're gonna wind. I think Susan left a comment in the chat room about an April 9th meeting going on in Broward County about our group here, Florida Power and Light, which is in South Florida, which does a lot of things going on, and so some of you may join with that, and I may pass along some info on that to folks on this call. And I want to thank Kate so much for the presentation. We're kind of winding up here. Kate, did you drop some of that information? I don't know if you got an email that you put in there. Did you put that in there? Yeah, I see it. Okay. So we're
Yeah,
good.
it's an email, and then also there's a link if anyone wants to chat one-on-one about what this could look like in your area or just learn more or whatever. The last link is like you sign up for a time, and I'll send you a Zoom link if that's easier, but also feel free to just email me.
Great. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to do a quick share out of next month's and put a link in the chat real quick. This is for Rachel Wellman. We'll have it a month from now, April 22nd. She's got a program that she did for our university, Florida Atlantic University, Climate Resilience and Education for Dedicated Youth, called Climate Ready Program. And this is for teens, high school students, and low socioeconomic groups. So I'm gonna just share that with you now and follow up. I'll send you all an email about that. But let's see if I can stop that share. Okay, stop share. There you go. And I'll post a link in the registration in the chat room, but I'll definitely follow up with everyone from that as well. And hope you might join us next week and get some of our other educators on board here. And Kate, I'm sure there will be lots of folks in the education community looking at this, and I will make it a point of passing this along, the link to this recording, to some of our principals in schools in Pembroke Pines. So thank you so much for everything you're doing, and thanks for all of you for joining, and hope to see you again.
Yeah,
Any-
wait, this is so fun. Appreciate everyone's questions and
Thank you,
insights.
Kate. When I don't know how old you are, but when I was your age, I'm sure I didn't use any 1/10 of the vocabulary that you're familiar with using. So thank you. Thank you for your interest. This is wonderful.
That's really kind. Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Rhonda. All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.